Before 7 here on this Thursday morning. So time to talk energy and different forms of energy. We'll start off here. The remaining board members of the Nuclear Energy Corporation of South Africa, that's NECSA, have resigned en masse. NECSA is responsible for the research of energy as well as the processing and storage of nuclear material. In 2018, 4 NECSA board members resigned. Yesterday, the Energy Ministry confirmed that the remaining 4 board members had also submitted their resignation. According to media reports, the reason given for the resignations is the lack of operational and financial support from Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe. NECSA has allegedly been insolvent since 2016. Well, let's discuss this more. In studio, as always, energy expert Ted Blom joins us. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning.
Let's talk to NECSA first, and then we'll definitely find some time to talk about what's going on with Eskom as well. So, I mean, we look at NECSA, and it is impressive. I mean, we've broadcasted from there, actually, and it's one of the world's largest producers of something like medical radioisotopes, if I'm correct in saying that. I mean, what are the consequences of what's going on there?
Okay, so in layman's terms, it's nuclear medicine.
Yeah.
And NECSA was probably one of the largest exporters of nuclear medicine worldwide, around about 30+% of the world market. They've been in turmoil, though, because they were also one of the entities that were subjected to state capture. And we've seen a lot of action around the board. The old board went to court and in fact got a judgment against the previous minister who was responsible for that portfolio.
Jeff Radebe, we talked about.
That's right. Notwithstanding that a different board, or the current board, was appointed. And we've had this turmoil in the organization with a new board still reigning, whilst the old board was found to have been not properly dissolved. So it's a lot of mess, and as also with all the other state-captured entities, the money has been looted, they're bankrupt, they don't have money to go forward. So even if you've got the best intentions in the world, if you haven't got a budget and you haven't got financial support, it's impossible to restructure or fix up and reconstitute yourself. Just totally impossible.
Yeah. I mean, how bad is the financial situation?
Well, I mean, they've been very close to the brink of not being able to pay salaries on a number of occasions, as with the other state-owned entities. I think the whole manner in which state-owned entities, if you can look at it a little bit broader, are being managed is a bit like a local sort of mom-and-pop store, as they're called in America. They haven't been given proper opportunities to create budgets, and it all goes to hand in hand with the fiscal tightening of the environment in South Africa. We are in a close to recession situation now for probably more than 5 years, 6 years, and money is just not available. Full stop.
Yeah, and that is unfortunately a reality. This, of course, the resignations that we're talking to, comes hot on the heels of the resignation of Jabu Mabuza, and this is from Eskom. I mean, are we seeing a massive correlation of what's going on in the energy sector?
Okay, so Mr. Mabuza's resignation is a little bit different, and it speaks to the fact that the Eskom board, which has been in place more or less the same period of time, about 2 years, was not fit for purpose from day one. And I went on record of that. It was a very unpopular comment that I made, but it is fact. And this proves the fact that giving undertakings as to load shedding not being implemented is probably the worst undertaking in the world that you can give. Because load shedding, by Eskom's own definition, is there to protect the grid. So when you promise people we're not going to load shed, you immediately increase the risk of meltdown of the grid. And it's just unfathomable that anybody in his right mind can give that type of undertaking. You put the whole country and the whole economy at risk for a period of 10 to 20 years if we have a meltdown, just to satisfy political ambitions. It's irrational.
Yeah, yeah. I'm going to pause you on that conversation because I want to talk a little bit deeper about it. I just want to delve on the NECSA story for a little bit longer, because what would we do without a NECSA? Because, I mean, we look at NECSA, I mean, if we go back over the years, there was talk that South Africa wanted to go the nuclear route, and then, of course, it got very, very complicated, seeing the costs coming in, and the Zuma administration, of course, then moving over to Ramaphosa, who had a different vision. You know, the political interference and the turmoil that's been happening there, could you say that's been at the root of almost the downfall of NECSA?
Absolutely. And the role that NECSA also plays that we haven't mentioned is it's actually the regulator for Coburg. So Coburg needs to be regulated and comply with world standards. And yes, I think that this meltdown at the NECSA board level is symptomatic of state interference. And this has happened, let's go right back to when the state-owned entities were formed, and that was around about 2000, 2001. Certainly we had the Eskom Conversion Act in 2001, which converted Eskom from an independent entity to a state-owned enterprise. That was all done against the background of lack of any guidelines and rules and regulations for governance. Those governance rules only came in later. But the rot had already set in right from the beginning, because you immediately had new boards appointed, which were all political appointees and came with a political mandate. And unfortunately, it's taken 20 years for the chickens to come home to roost. But believe you me, the rot is sitting all over the show. And it's very plain and clear to the outside eye that the last people who are qualified to run state-owned entities or any operational stuff is the government. They're just not. Their agenda is totally different. They don't look into the long-term sustenance of these operations, and in a lot of cases, it just makes these entities far more vulnerable to looting.
Yeah, privatizing NECSA, could that happen?
Well, you can't have a private regulator. A regulator's got to be government-owned, just by definition of the role that it needs to play. Parts of NECSA could, however, be halved off, and for instance, the manufacture of nuclear isotopes, that could maybe be halved off into a PPP, but the regulatory part needs to stay with government.
Yeah, just the response from the Minister, Gwede Mantashe, to the resignations on Twitter. He was saying, we must reinstate NECSA into a functional state. We can't allow dysfunctional governance. We must appreciate that correcting governance is painful. Do you perhaps think that the right steps are being made in the background, and this is the repercussions of that?
No, I'm afraid not. I think there's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of noise. The noise all seems to be in the right direction, but behind the scenes, I'm led to believe there's massive factional fighting going on within the ruling party, and what's being implemented is not what's being promised to the public.
Yeah, and one of the telling things was he also went on to say that they're in the process of rebuilding it, but they're not doing it in a rush. You know, it's something that must take time. But in the meantime, we're running out of energy, and the country is facing
We're running
a
out of
crisis.
economy.
And that, I mean, a response like that, I suppose we're looking for leadership and confidence. And when you say that, you know, we take in our time, these things take time. I don't think we've got time.
Absolutely not. I agree with you. As I said, we're busy losing our economy in the process. And you're in the news, you read the symptoms of the economy. Companies downsizing at a massive rate. Those are the ones that made the headlines. I mean, we're not even going to talk about the mining industry and the smelting industry who are busy closing down because of the lack of certainty at Eskom. You cannot bring hundreds of thousands of workers to work every day, expect to pay them, if you can't operate and generate revenue.
Yeah. I mean, I was reading an article on MoneyWeb, and MoneyWeb were talking to the fact that NECSA has gone through 6 CEOs and 2 chairpeople in 6 months. I mean, that is frightening.
It's not. It doesn't lead to sustainability.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't.
All right, so that's NECSA. Let's talk Eskom, because you know, you started alluding to Eskom and where we're sitting. So we're now in a battle with NERSA and Eskom as well, because I mean the battle just gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
There are 5 court cases going.
Talk to me about what's going on there.
Okay, so the big fight, and I think a lot of it was instituted by the outgoing chairman, Mr. Mabuza, who decided that he will take on the fight on behalf of Eskom against the regulator. As a consequence of that, we've got 5 court cases, of which the first is currently before the courts. And the first one relates to the bailout that government promised Eskom, 3 amounts of 23 billion rand per year for 3 years. And At the time that the bailouts were made and promised and promulgated, government said it was to assist Eskom with operational costs and pressures. The Eskom board and officials confirmed that and said that, yes, this is a very welcome injection to subsidize the operational costs and the burdens of Eskom. And what NERSA then, as a consequence of those pronouncements and categorization of the bailouts did, is it treated the income as operational income. And said, well, if the government is now subsidizing Eskom's operational costs, well, thank goodness, because that means that the consumer doesn't have to cough up as much in terms of increases.
Yeah.
However, when they ran the numbers and their own sort of judgment on what the numbers constituted through their financials, they saw that there would be no positive impact on Eskom's bottom line. And they're now reversing the categorization of the bailout from an income statement item to a balance sheet item. They're saying, no, we'll put that into equity or we'll use it to amortize the loans. So I think Eskom and its officials and government, Treasury, who made the bailout available, shot themselves in the foot, and I think NERSA did the right thing. They listened to what they were told, and now the Eskom and the government is trying to reverse what they told the public.
Wow. Listen, when you're sitting with 450 billion rand debt, you have to work hard to find out how you're going to get that money. It really is a big one. But at the same time, you've also got to keep the lights on. Stage 8 load shedding. This is what was being spoken about. And then, of course, the Eskom coming out and saying that's not going to happen. I mean, we had stage 6, but this is just talk. Not going to happen. Do you think it's going to happen?
Well, it's not a question of whether it's going to happen. It's a question of preparing for what could happen. And certainly stage 8 is a possibility, as remote as it might sound. In fact, I'm on record as saying we might as well go to stage 12, which will go right up the curve and get all the preparation in place. The reason why the stage 8 made headlines is because Eskom has prepared itself for stage 8. Those tables have been on the internet for quite a while, the schedules. But the municipalities, who are the other side of Eskom's distribution side, haven't done so. So that's why Eskom wrote to a number of municipalities and said, we noticed that you haven't implemented tables of going to stage 8. Please do so that if it does happen, even though it might be remote, at least the information will be available to the public.
What do you think is going on? I mean, I'm going to talk to the appointment of Professor Malechopuru Makgoba as interim chair as well. First, actually, let's ask that. What do you think? Are you happy with that appointment?
Well, I'm glad it's an interim appointment because I don't think it addresses the issues of Eskom. As I said, this whole board was not fit for purpose. I called them incompetent in terms of what is required, and the professor is unfortunately part of that 2-year-old board. He was a normal director of the company. He's now been elevated to interim chairman. But the good news, if there is any good news on a Thursday morning, is that the government has acknowledged this is a temporary arrangement. It's an interim arrangement, and they've assured us that they're working to reconstitute a more competent board for Eskom.
Yeah.
Because the situation there is incredibly dire. Besides being promised this bailout, you'll remember, and I'm sure there's news on your station, that that bailout came with a host of conditions. I don't know if you remember that, 20-odd conditions.
Yeah, yeah.
The sad fact is that I don't think Eskom can comply with all those conditions. So if they don't comply with the conditions, I don't think Minister Mboweni is going to actually hand over the cash.
Wow.
So the situation at Eskom, believe you me, is very, very dire. And hats off to the guys who still manage to keep the lights going on at all costs and at tremendous cost to themselves. But it's time for proper leadership. It's time to take Eskom out of the political football game, and it's time for proper, competent staff. And to restructure Eskom needs proper competence. We don't have that competence in terms of turning around a utility in South Africa. And I'm on record as saying we need to go and tap the international market and bring in expertise. We've got a track record of turning around 3, 4, 5 utilities larger than Eskom.
Yeah, yeah.
We're in the A League. We're not in the D League or the Z League. We're in the A League. And if we want to stay in the A League, we better bring in the right team. Otherwise, we're going to just go down the leagues.
So what you're saying in a nutshell, we don't have the right team. We need an entirely new team to come in. That's what we're talking to.
Absolutely.
Is a lot of people are asking for an entirely brand new board. The whole board must resign. A new board must come in. So you're agreeing on that as well.
Endorse that.
Have we heard anything from the new CEO? I know it's early days. We do know that. But have you heard any rumblings?
Well, maybe he's just being wise. And I take my cue from the former finance minister and chairman of Genco, Mr. Derek Keys, who said that if you're involved in a new position, best you shut up for at least 6 months to 2 years, familiarize yourself with all the levers that are in the organization before you open up your mouth and be called a fool. So I think Mr. Director is doing the right thing. He's lying low. In fact, I'm aware that he's meeting with all the senior executives within Eskom, and he's trying to get to grips with a discipline that he's not familiar with. He's not an engineer. Most of the issues in Eskom are engineering or metallurgical issues, and he's now on a steep learning curve. And the issue is, why do we put ourselves through this pain and pressure when we have competent people who are already educated, and now we're trying to educate somebody who's totally out of his depth?
Yeah, I want to also talk about. I mean, we know it's a blame game here, because a lot of people are now pointing fingers at Minister Pravin Gordhan, and also saying that he's not managing this crisis very well, and we should actually move that portfolio of Eskom into energy. Is that going to make any difference? I mean, do you think Gwede Mantashe can do a better job with Eskom than Pravin Gordhan is doing already?
Okay, so I'm going to disappoint you. I've taken a resolution that I'm not going to get involved with politics one way or the other. I think Minister Gordhan did more than what is required from a minister. He actually rolled up his sleeves. But that, again, just confirms how dire the situation is at Eskom, that the minister actually had to roll up his sleeves and take control of the board himself on a daily basis. I mean, he was in the newscast. He was the spokesperson for Eskom for a long time. But whether there's anybody else doing a better job, or could we do a better job, I'm not going to.
Don't go there.
Please excuse me.
You're forgiven.
I've learned.
Yeah, exactly. It can burn your fingers. But Ted, help me out. I ask you this every single time. What needs to be done? I suppose. Let me start with an optimistic question to you. Can Eskom be fixed? Is it possible that at this point in time, with regard to South Africa's energy problems and crisis, can we fix it?
With a lot of political will, at seconds before midnight, this is our last chance. If we don't do things right now, I think it's over and goodbye. What needs to be done immediately, as a matter of extreme urgency, is to import 5 gigawatts. The minister's aware of it, the government's aware of it. The proposal is actually on Eskom's desk. Import 5 gigawatts of new energy, which will give you space to fix up the old plant properly, not patch jobs, refurbish them, and get them ready for another 20 to 30 years' life. If we don't do that as a matter of urgency, I think it's over and goodbye.
Independent power producers, big talk around that. Is that the route to go? No,
and the reason is very simple. The solar people only provide power from about 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Your peak and my peak is between 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the morning, and 4 o'clock and 9 o'clock at night. There's no solar power at that time of the day. As far as the wind, largely as far as I can ascertain, the wind patterns or wind generation patterns follow solar. Solar makes the air hot, and that creates wind. If it's a cloudy day, there's no solar and there's no wind power. So given that it's not dispatchable, there's no backup for these units, which is a big shortcoming as far as renewables is concerned. They don't have backup power.
Yeah.
And backup power costs 20 times more than coal. So you've got to decide where you're going to ration your money. You put it into something that's available 10, 15, 20% of the time, or something that's available 24/7. That's the decision. It's very simple.
Right. Ted, thanks so much for talking to us. I know a lot of issues covered there with Ted Blom, an energy expert, talking to us about NECSA, the resignation of the board members, the leadership, the financial problems there, as well as what's happening with Eskom. In fact, Eskom is going to be discussed in our news. It'll be our top story, so do stay tuned. That's coming up straight after this break.